Alright people, so welcome to Jumbo IAS and welcome to this lecture series called UPSC Prelims Phoenix Batch. In this batch, we revise the entire syllabus, both static as well as current affairs for UPSC Prelims examination. Now this particular lecture is related to your static lecture series, and in this static lecture series today we are going to start with Indian polity. So basically today is day 1 of Indian polity. Now, the schedule for Indian polity has been shared with you well in advance. What are we going to do in these next 14 days? We'll revise the entire syllabus for Indian polity, plus we are going to practice more than 500 MCQs from Indian polity alone. So your Indian polity portion would be revised properly and more than 500 MCQs would be practiced properly. And in case you have any doubts, well, you are enrolled in these WhatsApp groups, do ask your doubts there and then. As soon as these doubts occur to you, just ask those doubts. Okay, we want to be thorough this time so that we have a very high chance of clearing this time's prelims examination. All right, now today is day 1. And what were your daily targets? As per your schedule, your daily targets were making of the constitution, preamble, and union and its territories. Now the notes for these topics have been shared with you already. So I'm hoping that you have already gone through those notes and now you're sitting for this lecture. Because going through those notes was your revision number 1. And then sitting for this lecture would be your revision number 2. And in this revision number 2, you're also going to be practicing 30 MCQs from these topics. All right. So this is the schedule. Let's begin today's lecture. All right. So Indian polity, day 1, and your targets were making of the constitution, then it was preamble, and then it was union and its territories. Okay, so these were your targets. Now we are going to be practicing, well, we are going to divide this 30 MCQ set into 3 parts. The first would be making of the constitution, around 10 questions, then preamble, then union and its territories. So let's start discussing MCQs from making of the constitution first. Okay, so let's begin. All right. So with reference to objectives resolution, consider the following statements. It was moved by Jawaharlal Nehru in the Constituent Assembly on December 9, 1946. It was adopted unanimously by Assembly in January 1947. It provided the guiding principles that eventually shaped the preamble of the Constitution. Okay, so the British were about to leave India, and this independent India had to create its own constitution. Now, for that purpose, Constituent Assembly was created. Okay, and in that Constituent Assembly, well, before starting deliberations or discussions on how should be our next constitution, before starting discussions on that, well, the basic guidelines of our constitution had to be communicated. Okay, I mean the basic principles of our constitution. Yes, we are going to create a detailed constitution in these next 2 years, but what are the guiding principles? Should it be a liberal constitution? Should it ensure justice, liberty, and all these things? Okay, so we are going to make a constitution, but what would be the guiding principles? What would be the framework? That framework was your objectives resolution, and it was moved by Jawaharlal Nehru, and it was moved on December 13th, 1946, not December 9th. Okay, then some discussions were held on this objectives resolution, and it was unanimously adopted by the Constituent Assembly on 22nd January 1947. So second statement is correct, first is false. And yes, later the preamble of our constitution directly borrowed from objectives resolution. So objectives resolution kind of created the basis for preamble. Yes. So the answer would come out to be B. Okay. Next. Which of the following features of Indian constitution were borrowed from Canadian constitution? So remember, our constitution, because when India was making its own constitution, many constitutions were already enacted. So we had the good luck of looking at the working of these constitutions, and we could basically borrow good features and ignore the bad features. So Dr. B.R. Ambedkar looked at an exhaustive list of constitutions. What works, what doesn't. Okay. Now, which features were borrowed from Canadian Constitution? So advisory jurisdiction of the Supreme Court, yes, it was borrowed from the Canadian Constitution. The Supreme Court, the President can ask for an advisory opinion of the Supreme Court. Nomination of the members of Rajya Sabha. Now, Rajya Sabha contains elected members, but there are 12 nominated members. Now, this system of nomination we borrowed from Irish Constitution, so this is false. Federation with a strong center, absolutely. Okay, Indian constitution is federal, yet it has many unitary features. And this was basically borrowed from the Canadian constitution. Okay, Canadian constitution is also like that. An appointment of governors by the center. Well, the president appoints governor of every state. In America, the governors are directly elected by the people. But in Canada, it is appointed by the president. And in case of Canada, it's the governor general. So in India, it is appointed by the president. The process is same. So this. So the answer would come out to be 1, 3, and 4. Okay, next. Consider the following pairs of committees and their chairmen. Okay, so in the Constituent Assembly, well, there were different committees for different features of the Constitution. Okay, now you have to match them with their chairpersons. So Committee on Rules of Procedure, well, it was left to Dr. Rajendra Prasad. Order of Business Committee, okay, what would be, how would the business be run? I mean, the business in Constituent Assembly, what would be the rules? K.M. Munshi. States Committee, well, it was under Nehru, Jawaharlal Nehru, not Sardar Patel. Sardar Patel was Provincial Constitution Committee, so this is false. And Fundamental Rights Subcommittee was under G.B. Kriplani. Absolutely correct. Only 3 pairs are correctly matched. Okay, this is a question related to facts. It's a factual question, not conceptual. So we are not going to spend more time in it. Question number 4. Regarding the composition and formation of Constituent Assembly, consider the following statements. The Assembly was a fully elected body based on universal adult franchise. The Cabinet Mission Plan originally proposed a total strength of 389 members. After the partition, the membership was reduced to 299 members. So look, our Constituent Assembly would create constitution for independent India. But what would be the process of creating this Constituent Assembly? Okay, how would this Constituent Assembly be created? That was given by the British Cabinet Mission Plan. Okay, and the British Cabinet Mission Plan originally gave the plan for United India, no partition. So in that plan, 389 members would represent the entire Indian subcontinent. Okay, so this is correct. But after India was partitioned, some of these seats went to Pakistan. So it got reduced to 299 members. Some were from British India and some were from princely states. Okay, the members of princely states would be nominated by their rulers. So the kings would nominate a member from their princely state for this, and members of British India would be elected by the elected members of state assemblies. So it won't be direct elections by the people. So it was not a fully elected body based on universal adult franchise because the voters were not people. The voters were elected members of state provincial assemblies. So this is definitely false. Yes, 299 members is absolutely correct. So the answer would come out to be B. Okay, next. Which of the following provisions of the Constitution came into force on November 26, 1949 itself? Now you remember this. Well, we celebrate 26 January as Republic Day because our Constitution was formally adopted, enforced on 26 January 1950. But some features of our Constitution were adopted 2 months before this date. Okay, it was on 26th November 1949. Only some features. The remaining bulk of the Constitution was well enforced on Republic Day, but some features were enacted or enforced on this day. What were those features? So citizenship, yes. The process of elections, yes. Fundamental rights, no. Fundamental rights along with the rest of the Constitution was enacted on 26 January. Provisional Parliament, okay? Yes. Before elections can happen, there would be a Parliament, provisional. That was definitely enacted on 26th November. So it would come out to be 1, 2, 4. Okay? The emergency provisions, the immediate provisions were 26th November. The provisions that could have waited, well, they were selected to be enacted on 26th January. Okay? B. Next. Consider the following statements regarding constitutionalism. Okay? Many countries have a constitution. But if they do not practice the constitution in its letter and spirit, there is a spirit of constitution. Okay? That spirit of constitution is constitutionalism. What is the meaning of constitutionalism? There are these 3 statements. It is an ideology that emphasizes the limitation of government power through legal framework. Country with written constitution is guaranteed to have constitutionalism. It focuses on rule of law and protection of citizens' rights. So the first principle of constitutionalism is that the government is limited, and it is limited by certain restrictions. Like in India, our government is limited by fundamental rights. Okay, and there is proper rule of law. There are many constitutions in the world which have a formal constitution, but the government is absolutely anarchical. They basically follow the constitution in name only. Those countries have a constitution but no constitutionalism. So first statement is correct. Third statement is also correct. Citizens' rights and rule of law are a priority. A country with written constitution is guaranteed? No. Like I said, there are many written constitutions in the world, but their rulers do not follow its spirit. Okay, and they are absolute, monarchical, tyrannical governments all over the world which have constitutions, but they are tyrannical, so they don't have constitutionalism. There is a difference between constitutionalism and constitution. Constitution is just a written document. Constitutionalism is an ideology that needs to be practiced. Okay, so the answer would come out to be 1 and 3. Okay, next. In the context of Indian Constitution, the concept of suspension of fundamental rights during emergency. Now, Article 358 says that if there is national emergency, Article 19 would be suspended. Article 359 says that in case there is national emergency, President can suspend all the other fundamental rights. This suspension, this idea of suspending fundamental rights during emergency was taken from Germany. Okay, because Hitler precisely did that and came to power by suspending fundamental rights. Nonetheless, the answer is C. Okay, next. Which of the following are the primary differences between a written and unwritten constitution? In a written constitution, the constitution is supreme, whereas in an unwritten one, the parliament is supreme. Written constitution must be rigid, while an unwritten one is always flexible. Written constitutions are codified in a single document, while unwritten ones are not codified systematically. Okay, so written constitution is like Indian constitution, American constitution. There is a single document, whereas UK has unwritten constitution. What is that unwritten constitution? Whatever the British Parliament, whichever law the British Parliament has passed so far in its history, becomes a part of the constitution. So laws passed by British Parliament are part of constitution. Okay, so in this case, Parliament is supreme, whereas in case of India and America, constitution is supreme. Even the Parliament cannot step beyond the borders that have been kept to confine the power of Parliament. Okay, so well, this is correct. Written constitution must be rigid, while an unwritten one is always flexible. Not, unwritten constitution is generally flexible because the Parliament is supreme. They can any day revoke any law enacted by them. But written constitution can be rigid as well as flexible. So American constitution is rigid. Indian constitution is a mixture of rigidity and flexibility. Right? So this is false. Written constitutions are codified. This is absolutely correct. This is the fundamental difference only. So the answer would be 1 and C. Okay, next. The provision for election of members of Rajya Sabha and amendment procedure of Indian Constitution were influenced by, well, that how are the members of Rajya Sabha elected? Well, through proportional representation by means of single transferable vote. And every MLAs, state MLAs would elect members to Rajya Sabha. This and the amendment process listed in Article 368 bears a lot of similarity with South African Constitution. Okay, so remember this part. Next.